You imagine that you encounter the world directly, that what you see is simply there, that what you feel is simply true, that what you believe is simply obvious. But between the world and your certainty, there is a movement so fast you rarely notice it. And that movement determines everything. Before you speak, before you conclude, before you defend, there is contact. And that contact is already shaped. Shaped by memory before you remember. Shaped by fear before you name it. Shaped by expectation before you consent. You do not meet the world as you are. You meet it as you have been patterned. If that is so, then clarity does not begin by arguing better. It begins by descending deeper. And this descent is not regression. It is the only honest ascent. Let us descend so that we may rise. There is an experiment often cited in psychology. Participants are asked to count the number of passes between players moving a ball. They focus intensely. While they count, something obvious crosses the scene. Many never see it. Not because their eyes failed, but because their attention selected for them. But here's what is rarely considered. The unseen object does not feel absent. It feels non-existent. This is how distortion is born. Not from malice, not from stupidity, from unnoticed filtration. You have experienced this. You reread a page of a difficult book and swear the words have changed. You hear hostility in someone's tone that was not there. You drive home and remember nothing of the drive. You miss your name being called because you were rehearsing an argument in your mind. As a martial artist, I learned something similar in a more unforgiving way. 1 second of doubt, one flicker of distraction, and you miss the movement that mattered. The strike was visible. The body was there, but attention was elsewhere. And perhaps the most dangerous filtration of all, the illusion that you are free of illusion. Your senses will quickly explain away what you missed as too fast or impossible to notice, when in fact, it was simply outside of your prediction. The brain does not wait for the world and then respond. It predicts. It builds a model of what is likely to occur, and sensation is compared against that model. What fits is amplified. What does not fit is softened, and sometimes completely erased. You do not see first and interpret second. You anticipate and then confirm against that anticipation. So what you call reality is often loyalty to expectation. This is the first movement of the mind. Sensation. Light striking retina. Air meeting skin. Sound vibrating bone. Gravity pressing downward. Before thought, before language, before identity, there is contact. And if that contact is distorted, everything that follows will defend that distortion faithfully. Your perceived enemy is edited to match the role you assigned them. Your perceived ally is polished to match the comfort you desire. Ambiguity is rewritten to protect your self-concept. You expect to be treated in ways that reflect how you secretly believe you deserve to be treated. And what remains unconscious will govern you, and you will call it fate. In the veil, we examined how outer structures harden around inner assumptions, how what you build in the world reflects what you refuse to examine within. In Mirror, we saw how identification narrows perception, how the self-image filters what can be seen. In Shadow, we uncovered how what is rejected internally appears externally as threat. But all three presuppose something more primitive. That sensation itself is clear. And it rarely is. Consider anger. Before the story, there is heat, a rise in the chest, a tightening in the jaw, a narrowing of vision. The nervous system mobilizes. Breath shortens, heart rate climbs. The body prepares for threat. Then comes the label. Disrespect, violation, injustice. The label recruits memory. Memory recruits identity. Identity recruits defense. And with that, the loop is sealed. Sensation, label, memory, identity, defense, reinforced prediction. The next time something similar occurs, the brain predicts it more quickly. Now the world appears increasingly hostile. Not because it changed, because the loop strengthened. And relationships begin to fracture. Not from grand betrayals, but from reflexive words that cannot be retrieved. This is how perception becomes distortion. Quietly, systematically, convincingly. Pause for a moment Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Not the idea of weight. The pressure, the distribution, the subtle muscular adjustments keeping you upright. Notice how quickly the mind wants to comment. Remain anyway. This is sensation prior to narrative. It is astonishing how rarely we inhabit it. You may think there is no time for this in real moments. That reflex is faster. That fear demands speed. But awareness of sensation can occur in less than a second. One clean recognition of the body often adds no time at all. And yet, it changes everything. When focus sharpens, time, phenomenologically, slows. Reaction space widens. Choice appears that was previously not considered. Grief operates the same way. Before the word loss, there is a heaviness in the sternum, a hollowing in the throat, a softening of posture. The sensation arises first, then the narrative. I am broken. I am abandoned. I am diminished. The story crystallizes sensation into identity. But sensation itself is fluid. When felt without resistance, not indulged, not suppressed, simply allowed, grief often transforms into something unexpected. Warmth, memory without contraction, love without possession, depth without collapse. There is nothing wrong with grief. There's nothing wrong with anger. Emotion is not the enemy. Unconscious fusion is. When sensation is met steadily, the nervous system recalibrates. The loop weakens, prediction loosens, perception widens. This is disillusion, a more accurate reformation. Later in this series, we will explore how clarity between sensation and thought gives birth to imagination, and how reconciliation between sensation and emotion gives rise to inspiration. But first, the ground must be stable. Listen again, not for meaning, for sound. Notice the subtle textures, distant hums, layered tones, air moving. Resist the urge to identify the source. Just texture, just depth, just field. If you can remain here even briefly, you begin to sense something extraordinary. Perception purified becomes participation. When sensation is not immediately compressed into certainty, reality regains dimension. And with dimension comes humility. There is a symbol in ancient initiatory traditions. A woman calmly holding open the mouth of a lion. Not forcing, not recoiling, simply steady. The lion is sensation. Unmet, it becomes chaos. Met with hatred, it grows violent. But met with unity, it becomes power. Power here does not mean domination. It means unity of desire, unity of aspiration. A consciousness that sees beyond the immediate reaction. When perception includes a wider horizon, unconscious force loses its tyranny. Love conquers wrath not by suppression, but by integration. There was a time in my own life when I realized I could not sit still for even 10 seconds without fleeing into distraction. The discovery made me furious. It felt like impotence, to be incapable of doing nothing. So I forced myself to remain. Not 20 hours a week. No aesthetic postures. Just 10 seconds. And something reorganized. To command your own mental posture, even briefly, is the beginning of initiation. Not permanent withdrawal. Not spiritual identity. But the ability to return. Meditation is a tool. You do not take medicine when you are not ill. But if you cannot remain with your own breath for 10 seconds without reflex, reflex governs you. If you can remain calmly, choice expands. Speech slows. Reaction softens. Strategy clarifies. Creativity sharpens. This is not passivity. It is participation. Perception purified becomes participation. Participation clarified becomes agency. Agency disciplined becomes freedom. The path is narrow, not because it is exclusive, because it requires humility. To descend into sensation is to admit that much of what you call certainty is prediction. But once you see the loop, you cannot unsee it. And once you feel before you narrate, identity begins to reorganize. Not dramatically, structurally. This is the first movement of the mind. Not glamorous, not abstract, foundational. If sensation is distorted, thought cannot be trusted. If contact is unclear, belief becomes architecture built on sand. But if sensation is clarified, even slightly, every higher faculty becomes more precise. Imagination becomes less chaotic. Emotion becomes less tyrannical. Identity becomes less brittle. And something remarkable occurs. You begin to live in what is happening rather than in what you expected to happen. That shift is small. That shift is immense. Dear reader, if you've made it here, you've already done something rare. You stayed. You watched your own perception long enough to notice it moving. That is not trivial. In the next movement, we will examine what rises from clarified sensation, how thought crystallizes, how belief forms, and how interpretation becomes architecture. Each movement builds on the last. If you feel the pull to explore these ideas more pragmatically, to test them, to apply them, to refine them, there is a place for that. But for now, simply practice this. Before the story, before the defense, before the certainty, feel, even for a second. That second is wider than you think. And from it, you begin again.